Hello, all my friends are synths. If you've been following along on my magical YouTube journey, you'll probably be aware that I've been experimenting with some old audio test equipment and trying to find ways to make music with it. Some of these old bits of gear have got inputs that you can modulate the frequency, whether it's a step sequencer or firing an LFO into it or something to get something a bit more musical and rhythmical. However, some of them are just straight up signal generators, and so all they do is pump out, a sine wave or a square wave or sawtooth wave or whatever fucking kind of wave. That means you have to get a bit more creative about how you can make it musical rather than just having a drone. And there's lots of ways you can do that, and I'll probably do a separate video on that at some point explaining the different ways that I am trying to make music with that stuff. But I thought I would look at just doing the bass level stuff with one of these oscillators that doesn't have an input and just use it for kind of nice droning ambient textures. The way I thought I would do this was using a looper, and in my case I'm using this Electro Harmonix 95000 whatever many zeros looper thing. And again, I'll probably talk about this in a separate video. But for now, I was going to use this to basically record different frequencies from the oscillator and then play them back in a kind of beautiful, endless, droning soundscape. The problem I ran into was that because the waveform wasn't perfect, or maybe the waveform was perfect, but the loop point didn't match up with the point in the waveform when I recorded through the looper. At the end of the loop, there was a very noticeable click or a step change, and you could hear it. And that didn't sound very good because obviously it didn't sound like a loop. It just sounded like, well, it did sound like a loop, but it didn't sound like a seamless loop. And so I had to kind of investigate and try and find the best way to make this work. After diving down a whole bunch of different Reddit threads and forum posts, I finally figured out a combination of things that worked for me. And I think it works for various different kinds of loopers, not just the Electro Harmonix loopers. And I thought, why not put a video together to explain so that if anyone else is in a similar boat, you won't have to go and dive into the deepest, darkest depths of the internet, but you can dive into the deepest, darkest depths of my YouTube channel and find a solution, maybe? To demonstrate this, I'm going to first show you what a normal loop that should be seamless sounds like, and how you can hear the stepping and the clicking and hear where the loop ends, so that we can then show you the difference once we actually record it in a seamless fashion. So I'm going to turn up the oscillator, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is record a new loop. I'm only going to make it like 4 bars, and then what should happen is it should be, technically speaking, a seamless loop, but it's not going to be for the reasons that I mentioned. Now, if I fade out the original oscillator and bring up the recorded version, you can hear there's a click, although my voice went weird when I did that. But so you can hear there's a click every time the loop comes round. It's at 4.5. So that's the exact opposite of what we want to happen, right? And the way to get around this is we basically, first of all, record a blank loop. And we do that so that, at least with these loopers, the first loop that you record sets the length of the loop, and you aren't able to make it seamless in the first go. So the first loop we record is an empty loop, and I'm going to do that now. Hopefully there's a count in here, but you can obviously make the loop any length you want. I find that a slightly longer loop helps because it gives you more time to do what you have to do to make it sound seamless. I'm going to go for like 8 bars, I think. Or I guess that's 9, I don't know. Now what we do to get the seamless loop is we essentially overdub and record the loop onto the empty loop, and we gradually fade in the oscillator until it gets to the maximum volume you want. Let it overdub a few times and then gradually fade it back out. And that way, because we're in overdub mode, it basically sounds like a a constant seamless loop. Now, the way I'm doing this, you're not necessarily going to get a strictly consistent amplitude. There will be a kind of gradual evolution and you'll hear things kind of moving throughout the loop. You can probably get around that by being more careful in the way you swell in and swell out and the points that you swell in and swell out and all the rest of it. But for me, I quite like the gradual movement because it gives a sense of dynamics to a loop, and that's kind of what you want in a drone. You don't want it just to be pure static all the time, or at least I don't. So I'm going to hit record. You can basically start recording at any point. I'm going to gradually fade the loop in. I can't talk over it, but what I'm going to do is let it run a couple of times and then fade out, and then we'll play it back and you'll hear it. Okay, so my mixer knob isn't quite as smooth as I would like it to be, but you'll hopefully get the idea. Now, if I fade up the recorded loop, you should hopefully hear. So that's the full loop gone round a couple of times now, and you can hear that there's no obvious start or end point, and that's exactly what you want in a loop. The volume is a bit different here because of my mixing setup, and I'm trying not to clip and blow things out, but you get the idea. You can hear that kind of natural evolution of the sound. And if you imagine that with some reverb and delay and all the rest of it, then it would sound quite nice. Now, of course, what you can do then is basically record different pitches. So I'm going to do that quickly, just record some other frequencies on the different channels so you can kind of see what I mean. So I've recorded a few tracks now. I've only done 4, but you could obviously do as many as your looper allows. Here's kind of what it can sound like, and I've not listened to this yet, so it might be terrible, but here we go. Now, as a man that knows little to nothing about ambient music, hopefully you can see how easy it is to quite quickly build up these beautiful textures. when you mix the waves together or the different pitches together, they bring out these beautiful harmonics and overtones and all those other good musical terms that I don't really know anything about. But just think about each one of these being routed off to a separate effect like reverb or delay or space echo or whatever it might be. And you can hopefully see how cool this would sound. Maybe as a background to a track, maybe to give some kind of atmospheric scoring to whatever B-movie project you're working on. Maybe for your YouTube channel. Or perhaps you would just get drunk and play about with the mixers and have a wonderful, relaxing time. Hopefully this video will have been of use to somebody, perhaps. Somebody like me who was confused about how the hell you actually made seamless loops like that on a device like this. Perhaps it will inspire you to make your own Hainbach style textural atmospheres. But whatever it is, you now are armed with the knowledge to do so. Go forth and bring ambience to the world. Goodbye. One last thing I forgot to mention actually is that I'm going to leave a link in the description below where I'm going to upload a whole pile of kind of these drone noises so that if you don't have a looper or some fucking ridiculous test equipment, that you can play about and experiment with it yourself. So go look at that in the box below.